state of Wyoming, and she is very involved in agriculture and has been on both the production level and on the state level. And I'm very proud to say that right now we have a congresswoman who is actually on the Ag Committee out in Washington, D.C. So she has an opportunity to affect change on a very high level. She's done it all of her life, and she's doing it now at the highest level that she can. We appreciate that. Cynthia Lummis was elected to represent the people of Wyoming in the U.S. House of Representatives in 2018. She was raised on her family ranch in Laramie County and graduated from the University of Wyoming with bachelor's degrees in animal science and biology. Cynthia became the youngest woman ever elected in the Wyoming legislature. She returned to the University of Wyoming for a law degree, which she received in 1985. Cynthia is clerked in the Wyoming Supreme Court, practiced law in Cheyenne, and served on a total of 14 years in the Wyoming House and Senate, concentrating on natural resources and taxation issues. Cynthia was elected state treasurer in 1998. In 8 years as Wyoming state treasurer, she converted Wyoming's primary fixed income investment portfolio of $3.5 billion to a fully diversified portfolio of equities, real estate, and fixed income investments, public and private, domestic and international, totaling $8.5 billion. Her term of office as a state treasurer ended in January 2007, and Cynthia continues to be involved in the daily operations of the Lummis family ranch. She and her husband, Al Wienerspan, also a former state legislator and a Cheyenne attorney, have one daughter, Annalise. If you would welcome U.S. Congresswoman Cynthia Lummis.
Thank you, Jason, and good morning. I'm very delighted to be here. Jason had the vision for this conference long ago, and through his own hard work and the hard work of many others with him, you're here today. Jason, thank you for having this great idea and pulling it together. It's a lot of work to have something like this come together so successfully. I also want to thank all the students for being here, because you're absolutely the future of agriculture, and your attendance today is deeply appreciated. Get to know each other well. You may be working together to solve this nation's food supply problems and issues and challenges, and the survival of this industry for decades to come, and enjoy each other's company in doing it. So I'm delighted that you're all here. I want to talk a little bit about the future of agriculture using a story, a real-life story, as the example of what I really believe is the future of agriculture, and how people on the ground with the desire and will to make it happen can do it. And my example is the American sheep industry. And the leaders in that effort were right here in the Rocky Mountain West, many of them here in Wyoming. Back in the 1990s, the American sheep industry had fallen basically to the point where it was on its knees. Demand for product declined. The wool subsidies had gone away. Predator issues were challenging producers. The slaughter facility availability became an issue. And literally, you just didn't see sheep in Wyoming anymore like you used to. And it looked like that industry was going to be something of the past. But there were some Wyoming producers working with their neighbors in the Rocky Mountain states that didn't want to let that happen. Frank Moore, who was a college classmate of mine, also a Wyoming legislator and former president of ASI, the American Sheep Industry, Brad Boner, and Pat O'Toole, all from Wyoming, got together and decided they wanted to make an effort at saving the industry. And I think the important thing here is that that was their goal. It was to save the American sheep industry. They didn't get down in the weeds and say their goal was to own a packing plant, or their goal was to become vertically integrated. They chose the big And I think that's important because of what they had to change in their own planning, in their own minds, as they pursued this. Most of us thought that to save the American sheep industry, they would have to become completely vertically integrated, and that the place to start was the next place in that chain, from production on the grass to the feeder to the packer. And so a lot of the thinking and time and effort and policy discussions went into how to acquire a packing facility. We talked about how to build one in Wyoming, how to finance it. Previous efforts had not succeeded, and those same discussions were sort of the beginning of this whole project. But because of the vision of people like Frank Moore, they decided to look at it from a more holistic, a broader perspective. So they looked at all aspects of it, and they used other commodities for their examples. They went up to North Dakota and talked to some of the wheat producers about the way that they vertically integrated and ended up building bakeries in Georgia, not in North Dakota. And that was at a time when the North Dakota economy was suffering, agriculture in North Dakota was suffering, and young people were leaving the state. But they ended up not building the facility, the value-added facility in their home state where they hoped to hire North Dakota young people. They actually built it in Georgia because the business plan showed them that it was better to have that facility near the consumer rather than near the producer of the raw material. So sometimes the goal of trying to incorporate too many simultaneous goals isn't as good as keeping your eye on your main goal, in their case, to save the American sheep industry. And even though what they really wanted was to have this totally vertical industry in Wyoming where we could hire people to run the packing facility and hire people to do box ready and hire people to do the shipping, they found out that there was actually a better model elsewhere and a better chance to succeed. They also visited with the beef industry's best example of using a cooperative model to do a grid-type marketing of a superior product and differentiate product and determine price for the producer based on that differentiated quality product. And I got to go with them to Kansas City when we had those visits. So in my interest in this subject, in my capacity as state treasurer, and at that time, my desire to invest in this vertical integration of the sheep industry, I got to have the bird's eye view of how these entrepreneurs, these sheep producers, were pursuing their due diligence. So I would say the next word is big vision. Keep your eye on the big vision of what you want to accomplish. Second, due diligence. And there is no replacement for good due diligence. It's a little bit like the overnight success rock star that you find out has spent tens of thousands of hours learning, practicing, performing in small venues before they hit the overnight success that made them an international rock star. Well, it's the same way with this type of business. The due diligence, the behind-the-scenes work, the grind it out, the go up blind alleys, the change directions is absolutely necessary when you have a goal such as saving the American sheep industry. Their due diligence took them up a lot of blind alleys. They were dealing with where to market, how to gain partnerships within those marketing efforts, and it took them to New York and to Pennsylvania where there were box-ready marketers who had end customers, whether they were grocery stores or restaurants, and they would break down the product depending on the demands of those particular customers. There was some corruption within that industry on the East Coast, and trying to figure out how to navigate the corruption within that industry was a huge challenge for them. And then finding the right business structure from a legal entity point of view was another huge due diligence project. And it brought them to conclude that they wanted to formulate a new style co-op legal structure. And so as part of their long, extended efforts, they ended up bringing a piece of legislation to the Wyoming legislature, which passed, and they had to go through the entire effort of garnering the support of the Wyoming legislature to do this, was to allow non-producer investors in a cooperative, which is not the traditional model that's been used in the Midwest in this country for years. So it took some creative thinkers within the policy-making venue to determine that this was the right style of cooperative business structure for this type of an investment. And indeed, after it passed, it allowed people who weren't producing sheep to invest in the co-op, whereas the traditional method is 1 lamb equals 1 share, and you commit to a certain number of lambs per year, which was also the model that they looked at the Kansas City beef operation. So finding the right partners, being able to abandon ideas that don't pan out and take yourself in a different direction. Have your thinking be nimble. Pursue experts. They got a law firm in, I believe, Minnesota that helped them craft the legislation that brought about this sort of new style co-op legislation that was enacted in Wyoming. And eventually they sold shares, brought in producers, brought in feeders, acquired eventually an interest in the box-ready distributor that had corruption in its past, and they pulled it together and developed this distribution chain on the East Coast, and recently have acquired that company. This has been a long process, but they saved, I mean this sincerely, they saved the American sheep industry. And these were producers that were educated in the West, that wouldn't give up, but were nimble and creative and did their due diligence, and as a consequence, have saved the American sheep industry. Those of you in this room will be faced with those types of challenges in your lifetimes. And you're going to have to be creative. You're going to have to be willing to seek advice, even outside of the realm of agriculture, to understand marketing, supply chains, international law, transportation, food safety. As Jason said in his opening remarks, it would be lovely if the world were as simple as it was for our grandparents in terms of how to navigate the production of food in the 21st century. But it's going to be very complicated, and it's going to require those of you who want to go there to be perseverant, to be nimble, creative, able to access experts and garner their suggestions and advice, and yet adapt them and incorporate them to what you know about your business that no one else knows as well as you do. And that is the future of American agriculture. And as I stand here today